Good morning everybody, Kupala here with part 4 of our 2D block-based building mechanic tutorial series. In this video we're going to cover a very small UI for the player to see what sort of blocks they're placing, as well as a very simple inventory system for the player to store blocks in. So this is what they're going to be collecting blocks and where the blocks are going to go once they actually collect them, and where we're going to remove blocks from when we place them into the world. So that's going to have a couple of different elements. We are going to need something on the screen, which I've already got set up already in the scene. I'll show you that now. I've just got a GUI element here. It's just an empty game object. So I've got a canvas under it. I've got an image, which I'm calling the tile, and you can see it in the game there. If I scroll over here a bit, there it is. I've just put this in manually, the wood wall, 64, etc. You know, that will change when the game actually runs. But it's just an image object here that we've got the wood wall sprite set, and there's a text element as a child object, and the text just says wood wall times or x64. There it is there. So nothing fancy, they're just anchored, they're just in place. We're going to be referencing them in a script and updating them. So that's the very small UI I'm going with. I was hoping to have something a little more advanced, something a little bit bigger, but I found that it doesn't suit that isolated sort of drag and drop mentality we were aiming for. There's not really any way I can build a UI that's going to be applicable to everyone, and no matter how I do it, everyone's got their own way in mind. So whatever I do here will probably only be applicable to, say, 5-10% of people. So what I think instead, I do have some other videos on creating some scroll menus and inventory menus and that sort of thing. So if you're not sure how to go about it and you don't really have anything in mind, you want something a little bit bigger, I'd recommend checking out those tutorials, because I think the methods used in those you should be able to adapt to this. So all I'm going to cover in this video and in regards to the UI is how to interact with the system we've already got in place, so the fundamentals to get it working. And that should hopefully give you a nice foundation to go off and build your own UI system to suit this building mechanic that we've got in place. So I won't waste too much more time, we'll get into it. All I've got at the moment, I've still got the same scripts, those three there. I'm going to quickly go through those. I have made quite a few changes while testing this system out, while testing out the UI. So it'd be good just to make sure that we're still on the same page. I've tried to make sure they were identical to how we started. I haven't added another layer, sorry. I've added a tag that we've called pickup. So add that tag in now. We'll be using that when we create the objects that the player can pick up, hence the name. Other than that, I think it's all the same. I've still got the same values set for the block system and the build system. The build system has changed a little bit, actually. That's a good point. Bring that up. Go to it now. I've added comments in as well, so if you want to add any of this in, feel free. Now, if you didn't notice, there was a bit of an update on the part 2 video where, thanks to the wonderful comments that were left on the video, I found a better way we can achieve this, and I've updated the script. You can get it off GitHub. It's on my GitHub page at the moment under my Unity scripts. There's a link on video 2, so if your blocks is, that's a build system. Let's go to the block system. That would be better. Whoops. If your block system script looks different to this one, I'd recommend checking out video 2. Go to the link on that and just update your script, or you can simply just rewrite it to match what I have here. The main difference is, you might remember if you watch video 2, we were using 2 arrays to try and match up the block types. We don't need to do that anymore. We're just using a struct block type, there it is, which we've made serializable, so it's able to be exposed to the Unity editor. So we've got a struct there, block type. That's just kind of like a class. I'd recommend doing a bit of reading on that. But then when, if we go back up to the variables here, we can see that there is a new array here called all block types, which is comprised of that struct. So if we have a look at that in the editor, where is it? Block system, there it is, all block types. So you can actually set all those values here as a type, that when the script runs, it'll just grab those instead. It's all there, it's all combined, and it's life a bit easier for you. So yeah, I'd recommend rewriting the block system script if yours is different to this one. Or sorry, if you're still using the original version I had in that video. And like I said, there's a link, so you can get to that easy if you just want to copy paste. Alright, cool. I'll go to the build system as well. So I have added in comments to all of this, and like I said, I did make some significant changes to this script while testing. So I'm just going to scroll through it very quickly now, so you can sort of go through and just compare. Just make sure that your script does match up to this one if you're following along word for word. Like I said, I've tried to make sure everything was exactly as we left it, but in case I've made any mistakes, I'd hate for things to go astray. If you do find there are any problems, though, definitely leave me a comment, let me know, and I will update it as soon as possible. There we go, cool. And finally, the player move, which you may or may not be using, but I've just added a few comments into that in case you wanted to have a look. And that's it there. Excellent, cool. Alright, so this tutorial is going to take a few changes to get this working. It's going to be significant. So bear with me, it might be a bit of a long one. I know the last one was too, I apologize, but we'll do what we can. So if you've got your scene set up, you've got sort of a UI element, at least an image and a text element that we can update. That should be all we really need. The objects themselves that we're going to be picking up, we're going to create in script, similar to how we do the blocks. So we shouldn't need any prefabs, we don't need anything for that. We do need a new script though, a new C# script in our scripts folder, which we're going to call block inventory. There it is. Cool. Alright, and we'll get to work writing that. Now this is going to it's going to interact with the other scripts quite heavily, so we are going to be making quite a few changes. Oh, what's it done? Wiped out that other script, I'll just bring that one back up. The build system, no. Lost the block inventory. There we go, cool. Get rid of that, don't want that. Okay, so we're going to start with the variables, as we usually do. What do we need? There's a couple of things we are going to need. We need to set the UI elements, so we need to store a reference to those. We'll do that now. We'll make them serialized fields, so we can just drag and drop this in the editor. And before we do that, because I always forget to do this, we need to add in using Unity Engine.ui. Like every time. Alright, cool. So it's going to be a private image. We'll call it inventory icon inv icon. And we want a reference to the text field too. So we'll do the same. Private text. Inv text will do. Cool. What else are we going to need? We're going to need a reference to both the block system and the build system. So we'll store all of those in two variables. One for block system, which we'll call blocksys, and one for the build system. Same again. Private build system, build sys. Sweet. And we'll need an int as well to basically store an ID to the block that the player has selected, because the inventory is going to need to keep track of that. So it should be pretty straightforward. Private int selected block ID, and we'll set that to 0 just so that it matches the building system's block ID, which is up here somewhere. Somewhere. Current block ID, cool. So that's 0, 2. So they should be starting from the same point, and ideally they'll stay in sync. We'll find out. Alright, cool. Let's set the references to the block system and the build system, same way we normally do. Private void awake. So when the script starts, awake. What are we doing? We're doing blocksys is equaling, because we're going to put this script on the game manager as well, so we'll just do get component block system. There it is, and same with the build sys. Get component build system. Cool. Alright, that's all we need for now. We'll move on a little bit. Now, I think it's probably best if we just write most of this in individual functions, most of which we're going to call from the building system script itself, I'd say. The first thing we'll probably want to do is have some way of displaying or hiding the GUI. So let's have a function to do that. Let's say public void toggle inv. There we go. And we'll pass it a bool. Inventory up. So that bool is going to control whether we can see the inventory or not. So if inv up equals true, then inv icon, there it is, GameObject.setActive is going to equal, oops, true, because the menu is up. That's all we're doing at the moment, because the text is actually a child of that game object, so that will disable the text as well. And else inv_icon.GameObject.setActive is going to equal false. Now we could instead just simply do this and ignore having the if condition there. Whoops, sorry, but we'd want to replace this to inv_up. So then whatever bool we give it there, it's just going to automatically enable or disable that object based on that bool. I don't want to do that though, mainly because we are going to do some other stuff as part of this check, but we'll probably end up doing it a bit later. So for now, let's leave it like so. So when we call this function, we're going to pass it a boolean, and that boolean is going to control whether the menu, whether the UI, so the icon, the sprite, and the text element is visible. Alright, cool. I'm wondering if it's worth putting that in now. Let's do that, I'd say. So what we're going to do is in the build system script, it'll be under where the player actually sets the build mode to be on. And I think, where should we do it? Yeah, I'd say here, just under if. So in the build system script, where it checks to see if build mode's on, we're just going to say, actually no, because we're going to need a reference to it, aren't we? Let's do that. So in the build system script, we'll add a private, what is it? It's a block inventory is what we call the script. We'll just call it block inv. There we go, and we'll do that in awake. We're going to store a reference to the block inventory script. Oops. Yeah. What am I doing? Thanks, Visual Studio. That was awesome. Alright, cool. Variable to hold reference to inventory. That'll do. And we'll do it here. Block inv. It's going to equal get component. Block inventory. No, it's a lot of get components. We're only doing it in awake. It should be fine. Cool. If we go back down to where was it? Nope, that's the mouse wheel too far. Yeah, if build mode is on, we're going to simply go block inv.toggle inventory true. So there we go, toggle UI to be visible. We also want it so that if build mode isn't on, we want to hide that in that UI, so we're going to add in an else condition, block inv dot toggle inventory false. So this should only happen when we hit the E key. We only need it to happen once, and it's just going to turn that inventory on and off once we set those references in the editor. I won't demonstrate that. I'm pretty sure that's working, and we all know what an icon being visible and invisible looks like. That should be fine. We should probably also, back on the block inventory, we probably also want to toggle it off when the game starts. Whoops. Toggle inventory, false. Otherwise, what we have in the scene, this here wood wall, it'll appear when the game runs. Whatever, let's do it. Oh, hello. I haven't attached the script, that's why. Let's do that now anyway. Drag the block inventory, attach it to the game manager, and see it down here. We'll add in those two there. So the GUI tile is going to be our inventory icon. That's the image. And the text I've got there is going to be our inventory text. I've called it selected text, whatever. Doesn't matter. Okay. So if we run it, it hides. If we press E, there it's visible. Now it's not doing anything else but turning it on and off. There you go. So it matches our building system. Cool. Go back to, what are we looking at? We're looking at the block inventory. What else are we going to need in this? Probably going to need a few different things. We're going to want the GUI to update, I would say. So whenever we make a change to the inventory, we need the GUI to reflect it. So we'll code in a function to do that. Update GUI. Oops. Nice and easy. We're making that public too, so that we can also access that function from the building system script. There'll be times when we want to call it ourselves. So inv icon. We're doing an if condition here. We're doing a check to see if the inventory icon is actually active. Oop, don't need that. So if the menu's up, if it's not hidden, if the inventory image game object is active, then only do it then. Otherwise, we could get errors. So we're going to say invicon.sprite is going to equal buildsys dot. Why can't I get the current block? Hang on. Build system. Because it's private. We're going to make... You know what? We'll make these... I think we'll want to make both of these public. We'll make both these variables public because we're going to want to access them. We'll hide them in the inspector too because we don't need to see them. Public. And same again. Alright, cool. We should be able to access them now. So just make those changes in the build system script. We'll go back to the inventory. Buildsys.current block. Hey, there we go. Alright, what are we getting? We're just getting the current block.block sprite. And we also want to update the text. So we're pretty much doing the exact same thing. We're just using the current block's name instead. What did I call it? I called it inv text. Text is going to equal the buildsys.current block.block name. Oops, nope, not sprite, block name. There we go. And we also are going to add in this. So blocksys. Actually, we don't have a value yet, so we'll just leave that as is. So it's just going to use the name and it'll update that. We're going to need to change that a little bit later. Okay. So at the moment, all that's happening is we can toggle the inventory on and off and we can update it. And we're probably going to want to update it every time we turn it on as well. So where in the toggle inventory, just add the update GUI after we set the inventory icon to be active. Do the trick. So when we turn the menu on, it's going to update it. So no matter what block is selected, it's going to be the first one we see. There we go. Cool. What else do we need? Alright, one of probably the most important things as well, we are going to need a value to store how much of each block the player has on them. So we're going to do that in the block system itself. We're going to add another variable to the block class itself. And that variable, we'll make it an int, public int, not indexer, what? Public int amount in inventory. And when we create a new block, we'll just set that to be 0. Alright, cool. And this variable here is what we're going to use. This is going to sort of store how many of the blocks we have. We're just going to update the block itself. So for every single block that exists in the world, we're also going to know how many of those blocks the player has in their inventory. When each block starts, we're going to have 0. Because those blocks are created at the start of the game. Alright, cool. So we'll go back to the inventory, and this is where we can actually add that value. We'll go back to where we update the text at the bottom in the update GUI, and we're going to add, what will it be? So it's going to be the all blocks array. Now we're not going to use the current block because that value may not be correct. The current block would be the value as it was stored when the current block is referenced. So we want to use the constant one, which is going to be in the all blocks array. I hope that made sense. You should see what I mean. So blocksys dot all blocks, and we'll use the current block ID for blocksys as well. So blocksys dot current block ID. Not letting me get. Why not? Block system. I thought I made that public. No, not blocksys. Buildsys. What am I doing? Buildsys dot current block ID. That's the one. Dot amount in inventory. There we go, we can see it. So it should tell us not only the name of the block we have selected, but also how many of those blocks we have in our inventory. Ew. Nice and easy. What else are we going to need? Probably a couple more functions in here as well. Just having a quick look, sorry. I think probably the best way to do this, we'll write the functions first, and then we can write the functions in the build system, or we can call those functions as we need to. So just bear with me, I'd say it's probably the best way to go. Alright, we're going to write a function to check if the inventory has any blocks in it at all, and it's going to return a boolean if it does or doesn't. We'll see. So we're going to write a public bool, and we're just going to say check inventory empty. All we need to do, so we'll create a temporary bool, is empty. We're just going to say true. So by default, this function is going to return true. We're just going to do a quick check. So we're going to say for int I is going to equal 0, while I is less than blocksys dot all blocks dot length. Add 1. So if blocksys.allblocks I.amount in inventory is greater than 0, so while we're going through the all blocks array, if we encounter one of them where the amount in inventory value is greater than 0, so if the player has any of those blocks on them, we're just going to simply say is empty equals false, because the inventory isn't empty. We do have at least one block on us, which we won't at the moment, but we'll make sure the player can pick something up. So return is empty. So when we run this function, it's going to return a bool. That bool is going to be true if the inventory is empty, and false if it's not. And we're going to use that just to prevent any problems when we are when we're running certain functions in the build system. Alright, so we're going to need a way to also add a block to the inventory. And we want to do this in a way that's going to be up to date with the array, I'd say, so that we're always adding to the correct block. So I'd say we'll do a public void add to inventory. We're going to pass it two values. The first one is going to be the name of the block that we are adding to. So if we pick up a wood wall block, when we pass this function to add one of those to our inventory, we're going to pass the name of that block. We're going to pass wood wall to this function to decide which block we're adding to. We also need an integer as well, another parameter, and that's going to be how many of those blocks we're adding to our inventory. So usually it'll only be one, but it'll just give us a bit of control if you want to add more. I'm going to do a for loop for int I equals 0, excuse me, while I is less than blocksys, so same as above, blocksys.allblocks, dot length, increment I. There we go. Alright, so while we are doing this for loop, what we're checking for, we're going to do a quick check to say if blocksys.allblocks I does not equal null, so just in case the block, that element happens to be null, we won't do this. If blocksys dot all blocks I dot block name, so this is where we're checking that name. So if the block name equals the parameter we've given it, block name, that's the name of the block that we currently are checking in the for loop. If the name matches the name that we've passed, then blocksys dot all blocks I amount in inventory amount to add. I'm going to add the amount to add to the amount in our inventory. We're then going to update the GUI to reflect that, and we're just going to return to end that function. Easy peasy. We don't even need the return. Sorry, that was a leftover. Get rid of that. No, we will. Sorry, we will use that because it'll break out of the for loop. What we want. Cool. So that's adding to the inventory, so we can call this function whenever we pick up a block. and it will add one to our inventory. Alright, and what else? I think that's probably one more we're going to need, and this one's going to be a little bit confusing, but it will make a bit more sense as we actually come to use it. So we're going to add another function that's going to return an integer, select held block. We're going to pass this function a float. We're going to call or direction. So this will make more sense when we actually code the part in the build system, but bear with me. So what we want to do is if the player scrolls the mouse wheel, ideally we only want them to be able to scroll between blocks that they actually have in their inventory. So if the player doesn't have a certain block, it won't be selectable for them. And the best way to do that, we're going to use a while loop in the build system to control it, and because we're going to be passing the mouse wheel to decide if the player is scrolling, that's where the float comes in. So, excuse me, probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but bear with me, it will when we actually go to use it. So we're just going to do a quick check. So we're going to say if the direction is greater than 0, then we're just going to make it equal 1. Else is going to equal -1. It's just to ensure that if we get any weird values come in as floats, that we sort of round them off manually. Alright, cool. So this is where we're using the selected block ID that we coded originally. So the selected block ID, we're going to add to that, and we're just going to do some more rounding, round to int, just to turn it into an integer. There we go. So if the selected block ID is greater than or equal to blocksys.allblocks.length. So this is similar to how we did the mouse wheel. We're just doing another quick check. We're going to say the selected block ID is going to equal 0, so we're just looping through. Else if the selected block ID is less than 0, so if we happen to be going in the other direction, the selected block ID is going to equal blocksys.allblocks.length -1. So we're just going to loop back around and do it the other way. Alright, and all of that is basically, this whole chunk here is just preventing any potential problems. It's just coding in something to stop us from getting any weird values, because we're going to be using a while loop. We don't want this to error, because if it does, we'll get stuck. And infinite loops are horrible and they crash Unity, so we'll try and not do that, ideally. Alright, if blocksys, this is where we're actually going to add, sorry, not add, but this is actually where we're going to return the value. So all we're doing is looking for the next block in our all blocks array that has something in the inventory. So if the player has any of these blocks. So blocksys, all blocks, selected block ID, we're just using that value, amount in inventory. So if it equals 0, if we don't have any on us, then we're just going to return a value of -1. Otherwise, if we do have one of those blocks, we're going to return the selected block ID. And that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm sorry, but it will in a moment when we get to the build system, which is what we're just about to do. But ideally what's going to happen is when we run this function, we're going to pass it a float. That float is only really going to be, it's only going to be a -1 or 1. So it's only ever going to be greater than 0, or, well, you know, greater than or less than 0. We're never going to pass it a 0, so it doesn't really matter. And we're just going to sort of break up this check based on that. And here we go. So we're rounding the value again, storing it as a selected block ID, and then using that as a loop similar to the mouse wheel. So we're going to be, you know, if it goes over the length of the array, it's going to loop back around to 0, or if it's going the other way, if it gets past 0, it's going to loop back around to the end of the array. And we're using that just to return a value, which we're going to use in build system to decide if the player selected a certain block. Alright, cool. I think that's all we need to do there. We're also going to add a check now. So I'm going to go to my player move script. So wherever you have the player, doesn't really matter. We're going to need a couple of things for the player. The first one of those is a reference to the block inventory. So in the player script, whatever script you have controlling your player, or wherever you like, just somewhere that we can check for collisions. We're going to add a private block inventory. We'll call it block inv again. There we go. And we'll need to add an awake function. Awake and block inv equals, okay, we're going to need to use GameObject.find, and because it's attached to the game manager. Once again, this will just depend on how you've got your game set up as to how you do this. Just how I'm doing it. I'm just storing a reference to the block inventory script. Excuse me. And we're going to add under the update function, what is it? It's going to be a void on collision enter 2D. And it's auto-filled that for us. Collision 2D called collision. I'm just going to call it col. Easier. Alright, if col.gameObject.tag. So what we're doing here, we're actually checking to see if the player has collided with a block that they can pick up. So if they collide with an object that has a tag of pick up, we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to go to the block inventory. We're going to add to inv. We're going to add, col.gameObject.name, because we're going to give the pickup objects the same name as the object they represent, so we'll be able to use that name to tell what object we've hit. And we also need to add in an amount to add to our inventory, which is just going to be 1, or however many you like. You could do 10 if you want, I don't care. And then we're going to destroy col.gameObject. So when the player collides with a pickup, it's going to add one of those blocks to their inventory, and then it's going to destroy the pickup. Pretty easy. So your player will need a box or some sort of 2D collider, and I think a rigid body for this to work. So if you don't have those, or you can't have those, then you might need to work out a different way for this to happen. But because my player is pretty simple, this is just how I'm going to do it here, just using a collision. That's all we need to do for the player. So now when a player collides with an object, or collides with a block, they're actually going to pick one up. And it's going to add it to our inventory. Awesome! That's all we need for the player. Let's get to the build system, because this is going to be the fun part. I don't think we need anything more in our block system script. The block inventory is done, the player's done. Let's do our build system. This is going to be all the fun part. Now we're going to need quite a few changes in this. So bear with me. We'll just sort of go through them. I think we've made most of the changes that we need for our variables. We can change them as we go through them, I'd say. We're actually not going to be controlling this with the mouse wheel anymore, so we'll probably end up getting rid of that variable. Doesn't matter. Alright, cool. I think everything else is about how we need it. Cool, okay. Let's have a bit of a look. So what have we done? At the moment, all we're doing is toggling the inventory on and off. We'll probably need to do a check, I'd say, at the start of that. So where is it? Just under the E, where we're doing the check for the E key. First thing we probably want to do is actually check to make sure our inventory is not empty. Because if it is empty, we don't want to bring up the menu at all. So at the moment, it'll do it, no matter whether we've got blocks in our inventory or not. We don't want that. We only want to do it if we actually have some blocks. So check inventory to ensure we have blocks to build with, and we're going to do this by saying if block inventory, because we've already got a reference to it. So if block in check for empty equals true. So if we don't have anything in our inventory at the moment, whoops, and I forgot the brackets. There we go. The function return. So if we don't have any blocks on us, it's not going to do the rest of it. Nice and easy. So we can't turn our inventory on, we can't turn build mode on unless we actually have blocks to build with, which I suppose makes a bit of sense. Alright, so we are toggling the inventory. Cool, that's what we want to do. We're doing all the checks there, that's normal. What else? Alright, let's go down to our mouse wheel. Let's code that stuff in, because that's going to be fun. Alright, here it is here. So if mouse wheel does not equal 0, so this is where we're checking to say, okay, does the mouse, are we actually using the mouse wheel? And because we're going to do the selecting in the inventory script, I reckon we're not going to need any of this. I'm just going to get rid of it, and we're going to rewrite this. Yep, alright, cool. So the first thing we'll do, we're going to do another check just to make sure the inventory is not empty, because otherwise if the player scrolled the mouse wheel, I don't think it'll actually matter, but it's probably just wise. It'll just prevent any, like I said, we're going to be using a while loop in a second. We want to be as careful as we can. So if block inv check inv empty equals false. So if we have blocks in our inventory, we need a new integer, so int new ID is going to equal -1. That might seem familiar, and you'll see why in a second. So here's our while loop. So while new ID, new ID equals -1. So this loop's going to continuously run while that ID is 1. So new ID is now going to equal block inventory dot select held block, and this is that lovely confusing function, and we're just passing it the mouse wheel. So that's the float. So if you remember, if we go back to that one quickly, you can see we've passed it the mouse wheel. Script over. So if we have blocks in our inventory, we're creating a new integer which is going to equal -1. We're then doing a while loop. So while that integer is still -1, we are setting it to be the select held block, the results of select held block, or the return of, using mouse wheel as the parameter. So when we pass it that, it goes through all those checks, it does all those things, rounds the number, makes sure everything's okay, and then it basically checks that block. It says, okay, well, if the block we currently have selected doesn't have anything in the inventory, return -1, and that -1 will ensure that the while loop continues. Otherwise, if we do have something in the inventory, then return the selected block ID. So what are we doing with that selected block ID? Okay, well, once the while loop's finished running, what we want to do is set the current block ID, which is the variable we have in this script. We want to set that current block ID to equal new ID. So, yep, we should be getting basically the next available block as a value back. And we're going to grab these and we're going to chuck these in this if condition up here. Whoops, I should have kept the comment too. I'll do that. That makes sense. There we go. So we've updated current block ID to set it to new ID, which should be whichever value we got back, whichever block we can next select. We then update the block, same as we did before. We just update the current block, and then we update the sprite based on that. Last thing we need to do is update the GUI, which we're doing from the build system script by calling the block inventory update GUI. And that will just ensure that, you know, so when we select the new block, the GUI itself is going to update and reflect that. Otherwise, you know, you'll be scrolling through the blocks and it won't make any difference. You'll only be looking at whichever block it had selected first. Alright, cool. So that should actually be the mouse wheel. That should get that to work. What else do we want? I'm wondering, it's probably worth coding in now some way to actually pick up some blocks. And I think we'll do that. We'll do that from the block system. That's probably the easiest way to do it. We'll do it in an update function, which we don't have at the moment. So we'll add that in private void update. How will we do this? If input dot get key down. T key, just because it's not likely we'll hit that by accident. What I'm going to do is every time we press the T key, we're going to create a bunch of blocks. So we're going to create one of each of those blocks that the player can pick up. And this is going to be the same function we use when we actually, if we destroy a block, we want to create one in the world that the player can pick up. So, you know, you destroy a stone block will appear that you can pick up. We're going to use this function to do it, but we're also going to code it so that every time we press the T key, we get one of each block appear in the world somewhere. It's not going to look very good, but it's just for testing, so you'll see. We'll do a quick loop, a quick for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is less than all blocks dot length I plus plus. Alright, so this is going to be the fun part. The good thing is we should be able to sort of copy paste this and only make minimal changes to it. We could write this as its own function, but I'm just feeling lazy and I just want to write it out, so you can do that if you like. We're going to create a new game object which we'll call new pickup. It's going to equal a new game object, the name of which is going to be allblocks i.block name. So it's going to give that object the same name as the block that we are currently creating. So, you know, wood wall, it'll be called wood wall, whatever. We're just going to add a component to that. It's going to be a type of sprite renderer. Where is it? There. Oops. Need one more bracket? No, that's okay. Good. So we've created a new object. We've named it the same as whatever block we're creating, and we've added a sprite renderer to it. We're going to say new pickup.transform.local scale because we want to adjust the scale to be a little bit smaller than the actual blocks in the world. New vector 3, we'll make it 0.8f, 0.8f, just 1, z doesn't matter, it's 2D. Alright, new pickup dot get component, we'll get the sprite renderer, there it is. Sprite is going to equal all blocks i.block sprite. Going to set the sprite of the new object to match whichever block it's creating. And we're going to add 2 components to it. So we'll say new pickup.add component. And I'll just copy that so we can get to it easier. And box collider 2D. So we're adding a box collider 2D to it. We've done that after setting the sprite and after setting the scale. To ensure that the box collider size matches our object. If we did that before, you'd have a weird, it'd be, I think, 1 unit by 1 unit or whatever, and you wouldn't have the correct size. So make sure you do this after you've set the sprite and the local scale. And finally, we'll add a rigid body to it as well, rigid body 2D. Okay, we need to adjust the tag of that object. So the new pickup dot tag is going to equal pickup, because that's how we're handling the collisions. And we're just going to set the position of it finally, new position.transform.position to equal, I don't know, vector 2 because we're only just spawning these in the world randomly. Up times I. So it's just going to create like a line of these going up into the sky, for one for every single block that exists in the game. So the player can then pick that up. I think that makes sense. Good. Okay. Alright, so that's in the block system. Back on the build sys, I'm just having a quick look, see if there's anything else we need. What are we doing at the moment? So the mouse wheel works. At the moment, if we actually place a block, it's still just placing infinitely. It doesn't really matter where we do them. We'll adjust those in a second. We've done the mouse wheel. We're still leaving this. All this stuff remains the same, like doing the checks to see if we can actually build something or not. We're still using that, so that's okay. Still updating the template as per normal. I think that's pretty much all we need for there. I think, yep, next things to do are to actually update those last 2 functions. And I think the mouse wheel itself should be working as well. Excuse me. Might just give it a quick test. I'm going to save everything. If we do end up getting stuck in a loop, that's going to be horrific. Oop, save. Come on, save. Give it a quick go. Let's have a look. I haven't forgotten anything. Alright, so I'm pressing the E key, but nothing's happening because we don't have any blocks to pick up. I press T. I'll loot them. There we go, and we can pick them up. We press E. Dirt, which is the block we're currently holding. We have 2 of them. If I scroll the mouse, there we go. It's staying up to date. That's what we want. If we place it, it doesn't have any impact on the inventory. We can place as many as we like. If we delete them, doesn't make any difference either. But you can see that there. And if we pick them up, you can see it's updating the GUI straight away as well. What we want. So I know it's a bit of a roundabout way we're going about it, but it sort of should suit the system we've got in place. And like I said, it was ideally trying to do this in a simplified way, in a way that sort of can be adaptable to this system with minimal other changes. So we'll go back. Alright, last two things we need to do is on the build system script, which if I bring that up, where is it here? There we go. So under the mouse wheel, we'll actually go now to the last two functions, which is where we're creating and destroying the objects. Gonna need to do a couple of checks. Otherwise, I think it should be fairly similar. We'll just do a quick check at the start. So we're gonna say if blocksys dot all blocks, which one? The current block ID, so the currently selected block. Amount in inventory is less than or equal to 0. So if we don't have any of those blocks on us, we don't want to place a block because it won't work. Or it will, but it'll put us in a minus value, which we don't want. So we're just doing a quick check here. So this is when we're pressing the left mouse button to place a block, and assuming that we can actually currently place a block. So if it's not blocked, which is a bad term to use, I apologize, but yep. If we can build and the player actually wants to build, then do a quick check to make sure we actually have one of those blocks on us. If we don't, then obviously don't place a block. Alrighty, this can all stay the same. We're still creating a block, so if we can actually place one, we want to do it exactly the same way. That all remains the same. Same with this check here. We want to split that up based on is solid or not. Last thing we want to do is adjust or update the amount of those blocks we have in our inventory to reflect the fact that we've just placed one. So block inventory, all is it block here? No, it's block system. What am I doing? Block sys, all blocks, current block ID, amount in inventory, -1. And then we want to update the GUI so that it actually shows we've placed one. Give that a quick test. When Unity catches up, come on, here we go. Alright, go, just spawn a few in, there we go. Dirt, if we place one, there we go. Now if we scroll, we can still scroll to the others, but you'll notice that dirt should be gone. We can't see dirt anymore because we don't have any of them on us. Place those, same goes. 1, 2, we can only scroll through stone, 1, 2. Now there's nothing to scroll from. Here we go. We destroy them, they're still gone. Alright, cool. And I've just noticed actually a bit of a bug. I can't turn build mode off because of the check we're doing, so we'll see if we can fix that. Last thing we'll do though, before we get to that, I think we might actually do the part where we destroy the object, so we'll just make sure that works too. So I'll bring the build system back up. That all works, that's the way we want it. But now if the player presses the right mouse button and they're over a block while they're building, we want to be able to actually destroy that object. So similar to how we did before, we're actually should be able to copy and paste a good chunk of that stuff and update it. I'm going to write it from scratch though. So same again, so we want to create a new game object, which we're going to call new pickup. It's going to equal a new game object. This time we're using destroyHit.collider.gameObject.name. So that's the name of the object that that we're destroying. Type of, do it again, sprite renderer. Oops, what am I doing? There we go. Alright, so new pickup, transform.localScale. Where is it? There it is. Same again, 0.8f. 0.8f1. No, I've done that wrong. Needs to equal a new vector 3. That would be better. New pickup, get component, sprite renderer. What are we updating? We're updating the sprite, and the sprite is going to match the destroyHit.collider.gameObject.getComponent sprite renderer. So we're getting the sprite of the object that we're destroying and using that as the sprite for the object we're creating. Probably also reference, what are we doing that in build system? We could also reference the block system to get it, but whatever. Oh, sorry, the build system. No, we don't want to reference the build system. Actually, that would be silly because if we destroy a block that we don't have currently selected, we'll get the wrong we will get the wrong sprite. We don't want that. This way works. Stick with this. Yep, good. Same as before. New pickup, add component, box collider 2D. Once again, doing this after we've set the sprite and after we've set the local scale. Rigid body 2D, adding one of those as well, and we're going to change the tag, new pickup dot tag. It's going to equal, oh, I can't type at the moment. Pickup, there we go. And finally, new pickup dot transform dot position. It's going to equal destroy hit dot collider dot transform dot position. So it'll be in the same spot as the object we just create that we are destroying. Just after we do that, after we've created all that new object and updated it and blah blah blah, then we destroy the destroy hit dot collider dot game object. What we were doing before. So that should allow us, when we destroy a block, the block should appear where we just destroyed it. Give that a go. Spawn a couple in to build. Oop, there they go. Alright, we'll build some stone blocks. Go, and if we delete one, see that they, oh, we can pick them up again. And if we right click without build mode, you see it doesn't work. Awesome, that is pretty much the foundation of that. I think that should work for most of it. There is a little bug though in the build system script. Where is it? If we go up to where we turn it on and off, the E. So we're doing a check to see if the inventory is empty. And if the inventory is empty, then we're basically saying don't turn the inventory on or off. And that's a bit of a problem. We don't necessarily want that. So what we might do as well is we might do a quick check in here. So if the inventory is empty, we're just going to quickly say that if build mode on equals true. Now, how's that going to work? Having a quick think about it, sorry. We'll say if build mode on equals false. Then return. Alright. No, hang on. Yep, no, that's right. That's what we want, I think. Oh, goodness. So, essentially, yeah, it's only going to do this check if build mode. Can probably even just do it up here. That would make a bit more sense. Let's do an and in that if condition. This is why I don't usually wing my scripts when trying to record tutorials for the record. Alright, let's give that a quick go. So hopefully if we run out of all blocks, we should still be able to turn our build mode off. So I'll just spawn some of those in. There we go. 1. Oop, what do we want? We want 2, 3, 4. And there we go. We can turn it off, but we can't turn it back on again. Hooray! Kind of what we want. It's problematic in the sense that, you know, we probably do still want to be able to remove those blocks if we're not in build mode, but you know, ideally if you're doing a game, your player would probably have some sort of tool to dismantle blocks, so I'd imagine you don't necessarily want that every time. The important thing is the fundamentals and what's going on. If you sort of understand those, you can adapt this to whatever you want in your game. And hopefully that makes a bit of sense. So that should be it working, guys. I think that's the entirety. That's this system in a very simplified form. It's, like I said, it's not pretty, you know, you could put a lot more effort into making it look better than I have. That's not the idea of a tutorial as far as I'm concerned. The important thing is it works, you know, and it's functional. It could be improved. There are ways it could be done better. Like I always say, you know, I don't show you the only way to do things, just simply a way. It's up to you to then go off and find a way that works for you, or a way that works better if you think there are better ways. You know, it doesn't really matter. But essentially this is the foundation, and you can build on this. You can probably still have a bit of fun with it, you know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something you use in a building system like this. It doesn't have to be this style of game. It doesn't have to be anything like the games I've referenced. It could be whatever you like. You know, you could sort of use this for any sort of style you like a could use this kind of placement for like a top-down building game or a tower defense, or I don't know. It's up to you. Whatever, guys. Use your imaginations, and I'm sure you'll have fun. But that's it. As always, feel free to leave me some comments if you have any questions at all. I love hearing from you guys, and the feedback's always awesome. I do appreciate it, good or bad. It's good to know. As always, please like and subscribe if you do like these videos, and hopefully I have a few more tutorials coming out shortly. If you have any suggestions or you want to chat, feel free to jump in Discord. The link's below in the description. I'd be, yeah, great to have a chat to you and just sort of see if you've got any thoughts on potential tutorials or any work you'd like to see for the future. I'm more than happy to have a look at that. If it's something I can do, I'm always happy to try and accommodate. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Until then, happy coding, guys. I hope your games and your projects are fantastic and you have a great time with them. I'll see you next time.